Low energy is one of the most common complaints we as health and wellness practitioners see. Low energy is one of the things that gets people into the office looking for solutions. So, if you are a health practitioner looking for solutions for people with chronic fatigue, low energy, or you're someone who's suffering from chronic fatigue and low energy, I want you to listen in today because we have a video that's going to talk about some special testing called the organic acid test that helps you to measure for various markers of imbalanced and disordered energy metabolism. So listen in. I've got a great guest. Her name is Lisa Fouladi, and she is got 20 plus years of experience in working with mystery clients who have these low energy syndromes and helping them to get their energy back. And she's going to talk to us about this particular test called the organic acid test. And it's a podcast, so you don't have to even be watching. You can just be listening in the background and learn a lot. So turn your speakers up and let's get started.
So, organic acid testing is one of my favorite functional tests. Organic acids bring our biochemical pathways to life and help connect the dots. So that's my reason for choosing it. But before I describe the test, I just like to preface our discussion with some concepts or questions that motivate all of our, us practitioners. And that is, why do people get sick? So modern medicine knows about diagnosing and treating disease, but what leads people to get sick? Before the onset of disease is a loss of function, whether that's physical, mental, cognitive, psychological, emotional, or etc. But how do we get on the road to disease? And that's a very relevant question because the question becomes, are there functional changes occurring that precede disease states? And can we measure them? And the answer is yes, actually. So my overall goal as a nutritionist is to move my client away from disease towards optimal health. And I do this through identifying imbalances. And one of the ways of identifying imbalances is through organic acid testing. Mm-hmm. Urinary organic acids, that's the sample is a urine sample, can tell us a lot about the body's biochemical pathways and physiological systems. So from a clinical perspective, organic acid testing is a troubleshooting test and provides a snapshot into the body's biochemistry. I love biochemistry, and a lot of people, when they're studying biochemistry or physiology, maybe they think it's just dry stuff. But when you get to use an organic acid test, all of those biochemical pathways, everything that comes to life. But we have to know what we're looking at. So instead of directly measuring nutrient concentrations, abnormal concentrations of organic acids provide functional markers for the metabolic effects of micronutrient inadequacies. So that's insufficiencies, deficiencies, whatever. It lets us know about toxic exposure, neuroendocrine activity, so that's the neurotransmitters, and intestinal bacteria overgrowth. So an organic acid test can indicate the functional need for nutrients and then can help guide our therapies, our dietary modifications, or need for antioxidants, or need for detoxification support, etc. And if I'm just going to define the term organic acid that I've been using like 1,000 times, it refers to a broad class of compounds that are produced as a result of metabolic processes in the body. And there are many factors that influence organic acid production: diet, toxins, microbes, genetics, kidney and liver function, etc. And all bodily functions are powered by the release of chemical energy. Okay, so when the organic acids are formed as intermediates in this process of producing energy in the body, and organic acids are normally absent from the urine or present at very low concentrations. So when specific reactions, so I'm talking here about biochemical reactions, are blocked in the body due to an insufficient amount of various cofactors, so that's vitamins and minerals, or an insufficient, or not, how can I say, an impaired functioning enzyme, organic acids that precede that blocked step accumulate and spill into the urine. So I hope that is sort of clear.
That's great. It's a great description because, we use the term and I think people need to be clear. But I also love that you started with that you prefaced it with what we're really getting at, right? That we're not looking to diagnose people with a disease. We're looking for imbalances that affect functional change, and the functional change always precedes a disease state. And so I love the fact that, this test is available for us, and we don't necessarily run it on every healthy person in the world because, it would be nice if we could run all these tests on every healthy person in the world because we could detect that maybe you're heading in the wrong direction. But we run it on people who come to us who typically have something out of balance, whether it's low energy or depression or neurotransmitter imbalances of other kinds. And so it helps us to see that picture of what's going on biochemically. So I love that you started with that. And I really, energy metabolism is the theme of this particular theme of these podcasts that we're doing right now. And so I want to get into that, like how do we use the organic acids to assess, let's say, mitochondrial function? Because we all know that mitochondria are the powerhouses of all the cells.
Yeah, sure. Well, also, organic acid testing pairs well with other types of testing, so blood work and even genetics. So by correcting or addressing these imbalances, we help the body's ability to heal and stay healthy. So that's an overview of what we're doing. And then in terms of assessing mitochondrial function, as you mentioned, the mitochondria are commonly known as the powerhouses of our cells. And all the energy released in our cells comes from the food we eat. And that energy comes from the sun. The energy from the sun is trapped by the plants. So you have to think about the big picture, not just, these tiny organelles and how we're connected to the whole, cycle of life. And so the sun's energy is trapped by plants, and then they transform that into carbon dioxide and water and then into carbohydrates and oxygen. And then, so not surprisingly, the release of energy from food is a complex biochemical process. And this requires a lot of different vitamins and minerals. And a functional deficiency in any of them can result in a lowered energy state that we know as fatigue. So the mitochondrial markers themselves, they are, how can I say, it's easier to present this if I'm showing you a biochemical, pathway. So I'll just try to paint the picture with words instead of a picture. But if we start with our diet, and our diet is broken down into the macronutrients, the carbs, the fats, and proteins, these are fed into what is called the citric acid cycle. And that is what enters the mitochondria, and that's what feeds the mitochondria. So the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle is the center for energy production. And the cycle consists of a series of reactions with metabolites entering at various steps from other metabolic pathways. So one of the primary functions of the cycle is to generate NADH and FADH. So this is, I'm trying not to be too technical, but I just want to say that's what it's generating.
We're all geeky practitioners, so go ahead and be technical.
Okay, and these are utilized to produce energy in the form of ATP. So we always talk about energy, but the energy currency is actually ATP. And any impairment in any step due to genetic or environmental factors can lead to high or low organic acids. So the Krebs cycle is really dependent upon its inputs, right? So that's glycolysis, so the byproducts of glucose breakdown, the byproducts of fat breakdown, so that's beta oxidation, and then amino acid breakdown. But it's also influenced by thyroid hormones and cortisol, so the adrenals. So it's kind of neat to be able to look at the whole thing. There are many things affecting the mitochondria. But if we look just specifically, what feeds into the citric acid cycle is the dietary carbs, fats, and proteins. And the citric acid cycle is not just a common pathway for energy release from food, but it's also a source of making various molecules that go on to help organ maintenance and neurological function. So it's kind of like a crossroads, and it's a very, very important pathway. And there are basically three phases for mitochondrial energy production. So it's this citric acid cycle feeders, which I mentioned, the breakdown of carbs and proteins and fats, so glycolysis of glucose, beta oxidation of fatty acids, and then the breakdown, the deamination of amino acids. I think that anybody who has an interest in biochemistry can read about it. It's just wonderful. And of course, you cover that very well in your course. Then it's the second phase is the citric acid cycle itself, which is this cycle that has various components to it. And then finally, it's the electron transfer chain. So the big picture is that this process has been really very well elucidated. We know how this process works. We also know virtually every known nutrient that is required. So the new part of this way of thinking is what we in the functional space, how we can use that to improve health. So the parts of the citric acid cycle has been, all the various parts, that has been known for a long time. And then we know as I said, the various nutrients, so the minerals, amino acids, the vitamins, and also the things that block the steps, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's toxic exposures or too many heavy metals, etc. And the conversion of the citric acid intermediate, so there's a cycle, right? And that starts with, it has various steps in it, but it starts after acetyl-CoA, and then it starts actually with, I believe, citric acid itself. And the abnormal spilling of these citric acid intermediates, so all the various biomarkers that are measured here, can indicate mitochondrial inefficiencies in energy production. And that can explain the biochemical basis of excessive fatigue and weakness. And it can help guide or inform our strategies for our clients. And then since the compounds that make up the citric acid cycle are related in a cyclical manner, it's very important to keep that in mind, right? It's a cycle. A block at any step can cause an accumulation of multiple compounds that precede that step. And each step is dependent on various nutrient cofactors. And then as I said, many things can block the production. So there are toxic effects of drugs such as gentamicin are in part due to a loss of mitochondrial integrity, because those types of drugs can inhibit certain enzymes that convert various markers or various parts of the citric acid cycle. And so the mitochondria stop functioning, or the energy production is compromised. And then we just have to know ways of protecting against these cytotoxic effects of certain drugs. It's better not to take the drugs, but oftentimes clients are coming to us, they're on multiple drugs. And so we just need to figure out how to support them the best that we can as they work with their doctors, whether they need to reduce the dose or whatever over time as the healing begins. But we also need to be familiar or aware of that various different nutrients are necessary for the citric acid cycle, the individual parts to work properly. So whether it's magnesium, manganese, NAD from B3 or B2, etc. And there are also some hidden clues that we can learn about what is going on in that person's biochemistry. So if the first three of the cycle metabolites are high, citric acid, cis-aconic acid, and isocitric acid are elevated, that can give us an indication that there is ammonia buildup in that person's body. And then we need to look at other markers. We can look at other markers in the organic acid test, such as orotic acid or urea, if we have a full metabolomics test. And we could also look at BUN in the bloods to see if that person has a buildup of ammonia, which is toxic. And if any of our clients have compromised kidney function, that is often one of the big clues that we'll see is ammonia buildup. But we can also see things about, B12 need, even if methylmalonic acid, which is a functional marker for B12, is normal. There are certain markers such as succinic acid and malic acid, if they are elevated, that give us an idea of the increased B12 need. And of course, oxidative stress. The mitochondria are very nutrient hungry, so they need a lot of nutrients, and they also produce a lot of free radicals. And our bodies have various antioxidant enzyme systems that their role is to quench oxidative stress, but maybe that person doesn't have enough. And there's an imbalance. There's too much oxidative stress. And so we know that oxidative stress and inflammation is the basis of many chronic disease state. So right there, we know, what we really need to be, concentrating on.
Yeah. So a couple of things there, right? So you might mention the drugs, and we do have a podcast episode that we did with Mihaela to talk about the specific drugs that have effect on the mitochondrial function. So totally recommend that you listen in on that one to get more details on that. And it's, the whole thing with the mitochondria being nutrient hungry is that it's not, I love how you're looking at the whole picture, and that's what this test lets us do. But it's also the other steps before it, which you mentioned, the adrenals and the thyroid, that are important too, is like we have to get the nutrients into the mitochondria for the Krebs cycle to actually work. And so we can't just look at the mitochondria. We have to look before that. How's the digestion? Is the blood sugar regulation, insulin regulation, all those things that get it in? How's their iron for transporting the oxygen that the mitochondria needs? So there's all these things that go in to it. And the organic acid tells us what's going on within that mitochondria, but also gives us an indication of what's going on outside. Did I kind of summarize what you just said well enough?
Yes, you did. Very well. Thanks. And it's really important because we can't underestimate the importance of diet. And then the quality of the diet, so it needs to be high nutrient quality,
low toxicity,
healthy carbs, healthy fats. Yeah, exactly. And then also our ability to assimilate the nutrients. So what does that mean? That means digestion.
Yes.
So if our digestion is impaired, then we can't be getting the nutrients. So doing this test in the absence of looking at the diet and looking at digestion is a bit futile, because in the order of supporting people, we really need to start with some foundations, essential foundations, which is really diet and then digestion. And it's good to look at an organic acid test. And there are many things that could block energy production besides heavy metals. It could be mold toxicity, things like that. But those are deeper down in the rabbit hole, let's say. And we should really start with some things that are very, very basic, and looking at stress and lifestyle and things like that.
I totally agree with that. And the thing about that is, like, if somebody comes in and they're smoking cigarettes and they're not sleeping and they're eating a fast food diet, like, you're not going to start them with an organic acid test, right? You're going to start them with coaching them on the specific things they need to do to get their body under control, right? Because you're going to see all kinds of stuff out of balance in the organic acid test. And what are you going to do? Oh, you need this vitamin or that vitamin. No, you need to stop smoking and start eating well as a starting point. So I like that approach because I agree with it. And I know that there are, some, I would say, functional medicine doctors who still have an allopathic approach where somebody comes in, they ask a few questions, and then they run like 5 tests, and they wait 6 weeks till the test results come back before giving people any advice. And I think, that works in a case where somebody's done everything and they're already eating an organic foods diet and they seem to be exercising and meditating and stress levels low. You're like, okay, what the heck is going on here? Then we can find some of those, more detailed, subtle imbalances that, just addressing the diet lifestyle didn't address. But I think for the most part, that's not our average person. Most people, we have a lot of work to do before we actually run the organic acid test and use it to get valid information. Is that kind of
absolutely? Yeah. And I find that practitioners need to be careful because abnormal levels of first there's an order in which to deal with things, like we said, the diet and lifestyle, digestion, things like that. I mean, there's a certain order we need to, but there's also a certain order to address things in the organic acid test. And the mistake a lot of practitioners make is that an abnormal level of a single organic acid can point to multiple anomalies. So we have to look at combination of markers and look at the person's health history and diet and all of those things in order to be able to narrow down the potential root cause. And we typically look for patterns. So while I definitely observe when a single marker is really out of range, but it's more important to really look at patterns to get an idea of what is actually going on. And we don't need to address every single molecule. Rather, we need to address the big things first, like you said, the diet, and then sleep and hydration and things like that, and then work through the rest. I mean, that's the successful way of helping your client.
I thought about as you were saying that is a lot of times we get clients that are like, oh, yeah, but it's so hard. Isn't there just a supplement? Isn't there just a pill? Do I really have to change this? But what happens is when I find that sometimes I run the tests a little sooner on certain people because I know they need to see it and then have my explanation of what's going wrong before they're willing to make the diet changes. And so when they see it, like, oh, you've got this and you've got this and this indicates this. And that's, remember, we talked about your dietary this or your, then they make the changes. So there's this balance there of, using it for a motivational factor and using it because you don't know, because it's like, oh my God, this is confusing. I need to run this test to see where some of these markers are and what nutrients are out of balance.
Absolutely. One of my professors, when I was going through nutrition school, said that, you don't just test just to test. We have to be looking for something or looking to rule something out. Right. So that's why we use tests. And people don't know what to do, then they really shouldn't test, because that's just going to confuse things. Yeah. And we're not being diagnostic, but we're just trying to really help support, our search for the root cause. But then you also have the sort of the healthy person who does have a good diet, that we're looking for imbalances, things like that. And a common sort of reaction when they look at the organic acid test is, oh, I thought I was healthy. It's like, yeah, you are healthy. This is indicating imbalances. And that's what we're trying to address to keep you healthy and to keep it from developing. So it's also important to be able to frame it correctly in a client's mind, that they don't think, oh my God, I have all this oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, right, toxic exposure, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. And I like that concept of, yeah, we're not like, it would be nice to run these things on healthy people who are healthy and doing things and they're not symptomatic. Cost effectiveness and all that kind of stuff, plays in. So we don't do that necessarily. But when we are talking to people and they come in and I say, I'm still tired or I still this, I thought I was doing all these healthy things. And then you find, oh, there's some subtle changes that we can make. And I can give you an example. I didn't run the organic acid test on myself recently, but I recently ran a Dutch test and some lab stuff and I feel great and I'm really super healthy. But there were some subtle imbalances of like B vitamins and a couple of things that I was like, oh, I need to upregulate this because if I don't address this right now, then maybe 2-3 years from now, I am going to not feel well. I am going to feel more tired. I am going to develop symptoms. So there's a couple of ways to look at it. I had put off doing any tests for a long time because I have no reason to do tests. I feel great. But I decided, okay, I'm just going to see what's going on. So it does give some really nice pictures. Then my next test after I address the things that I already found is to run a full organic acid test and see if there's other things that I can do. Because heck, I have a lot of energy, but I wouldn't mind having a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think if you slept a few more hours.
No, I do. I sleep now. So that's made a big difference, okay, right? I sleep now. That's my big thing.
No, that's great.
I'm sleeping.
Yeah, I know. I think you've improved your sleep a lot over these last few years. And I think you do meditation and things like that.
I do all that. So. I exercise, I meditate, I sleep now, right? I eat really well, but do I need a few other things? So we talked about the mitochondria and all the, the Krebs cycle and all these things. And you mentioned a few other nutrients, but what other things do you look at besides the Krebs cycle factors? What else do you look at on the organic acid test to help enhance and improve energy metabolism?
Well, I look very closely at the toxin and detoxification markers. It lets us know about glutathione and the person's ability to detoxify. So we're exposed to lots of toxins in our daily life, and really, it's really important to be able to detoxify things. So, for example, pyroglutamic acid is a functional marker for glutathione. And if we're doing a metabolomics test, which is from Genova or Nutrival, we'll get those markers. And then the other things, of course, we look at the catecholamine markers, so the neurotransmitters, because that has a lot to do with our feelings of well-being and energy and things like that. And if you can really tell if somebody's in stress mode or maybe they've just been in stress mode for so long, or they're depressed and things like that. So that's just really important because our moods have an impact on our energy or vice versa. I don't know if it's a cyclical thing. I don't know what comes first,
Well, sometimes you don't never know. It's the chicken and the egg. And this, because so many things in the body, nutritionally, biochemically, run in cycles. you don't really know which caused which. You just have to address what shows.
I really concentrate on oxidative stress markers.
Yeah.
Those are just really important to look at, because even if somebody's, let's say on the blood work, their CRP, C-reactive protein, which is a measure of inflammation, is okay, or if their ESR, the sedimentation rate, is okay, this tells us, the oxidative stress markers tells us what's going on the cellular level. So the lipid peroxides tell us what's going on at the membrane level, and then 8-OHDG tells us about oxidative stress at the DNA level. And it's really important to know that, because if our DNA gets damaged, then that sets up for lots of things we don't want. And then the lipid peroxides are important because they're cell membranes. We're going down to the cellular level. So a healthy cell requires a healthy cell membrane, and a healthy cell creates a healthy organ, which helps support a healthy system, which supports a healthy body. So we go, basically in this test, we go down to the biochemical level and also to the cellular level to see what's going on in the body. And so it helps to refresh, basic concepts of biochemistry and physiology and biology, actually, to see that, because a lot of people just look at what the lab says, what that person needs in terms of nutrients. And that all may be true because the lab has their algorithms, but it doesn't tell you about the biochemical pathways. And in order to really successfully support somebody, you've got to support the biochemical pathway. It's like the SNPs as well. If you have a genetic SNP for something, we support the biochemical pathways, and that's what helps support. And this test, actually, talking about genetics, helps validate certain gene markers. So, the most famous gene that everybody seems to know about or think about is MTHFR. And I don't know if it's really should have the rock star status that it has, but that's the one that everybody knows about. And everybody thinks, oh, I have MTHFR, I have to be taking this, that, and the other. And I'm like, really? Are you sure? So we can look at this test to see, well, what is their need for methylmalonic acid? What is their need for folate? What is going on with the other B vitamin markers? And we look at their methylation status. And so it can really, is that gene active or not? And we can see that in this test. And we can also look at other patterns. For example, if we're doing the metabolomics test, which also has the amino acids, it tells us about, the need for choline. And a lot of people have gene SNPs in PEMT.
I see that a lot.
And so that will let us know. Yeah. So that they may have an increased need for choline. And so it's just important. And we can also see if their sulfur metabolism is not functioning well or upregulated with various other markers in the amino acids. So it just helps us see where things may be going, awry, and how they can be supported, and also in what order.
Yeah.
And so, knowing about the amino acids is very important, because the amino acids feed into this cycle. And if we just do an organic acid without the amino acids, it's just giving us sort of a partial view, and we have to kind of guesstimate the rest. So that's why I like to do a metabolomics.
Yes. So, you're reinforcing why I'm such a biochemistry geek, and why, we, in our nutritional endocrinology practitioner training, we are like, it's biochemistry heavy. So, because it helps us, what we get, the comments we get from like medical doctors who go through the training is like, wow, we learned some of this stuff in medical school in terms of pathways, but we never knew how to actually make it work in real life. Like, what did it mean in terms of creating a plan for somebody, right? So I think that the biochemistry is something you really need to focus on as a practitioner, learning it so that you can have this at your fingertips. Like if Lisa and I are having a discussion and we see something and somebody has a specific symptom, and we go there. We go, oh, well, we have to look at this pathway or that pathway because of the way it's manifesting. And that's really helps you to become much more adept at getting good results for your clients. So we are close to our end of time. And before we wrap, what I wanted to do was just have you just give for our practitioners out there regarding using the organic acids, and in terms of like creating nutrition plans, and what kind of tips can you leave practitioners with regarding the organic acid test and using it to inform some of the plans you're putting together for people?
Well, like we said, for sure, do the organic acid testing. It's my, favorite test, but be sure that you have addressed the big picture, the important other bits, the diet and, dealing with stress and digestion, etc. And please do not address every single molecule. Try to look at patterns and look at the whole biochemical pathway. And then, it's important. I mean, we can see on this test, we can tell just by talking to somebody as well, whether they have insulin resistance or not. But this kind of helps with that. Kind of looks at, how well is their carbohydrate metabolism working? Because we see it's such an important, one of the gateways to health is optimal blood glucose balance.
Yeah.
So we can look at that in this.
Yeah.
So, but not to forget that there are other things that feed into this cycle, right? As we said, the thyroid, adrenal. So all of those things need to be addressed.
Yes.
And to remember where things are related. It's an interconnected web. And sometimes we go down specific rabbit holes and we forget that it's all connected. So it's okay to go down a rabbit hole if you just want to learn a bit more. But just remember, it's a human being and all the parts are connected.
Oh, beautiful. It's a great way to leave, folks. So we do this test and we go into way more details with pictures and slides and everything and go through this in our NEPT program. So if that's something you want to check out, just look at the links on the show page. And Lisa, this has been so eye-opening. And I think it helps people to see what kind of things we can learn from this and how you can help people improve their energy, because probably 80% of all the people we see, one of their main complaints is going to be they just don't have enough energy to live their life. So when you know how to use functional testing and when to use it in relationship to the other things you need to be advising people, it's really important to know how to do these functional tests as part of your success as a health practitioner. So the organic test, acid test, as we said before, it's not like first test you're going to do, the first step you're going to do with working for a new client, unless, like I said, they've been doing everything right and you need to isolate imbalances that keep them unwell. So this is true of most functional tests. I'm not one of these people who runs a gazillion tests right at the beginning. I go work with people and work with the diet and the lifestyle. You don't want to throw a bunch of tests because, number one, it's expensive. Number two, it's confusing to you as a practitioner. Now you're like, where do I start? Because you have all this information. So it's thinking things through and then working with people on the tests. So obvious diet and lifestyle needs to be addressed first. So as you become proficient at using these tests to help you pinpoint these imbalances, you're going to be helping people who haven't been able to get helped from other practitioners. And you're going to help them use nutrition and lifestyle. And you're going to be more successful with getting results and getting referrals, but also, help you to have a thriving practice. So you don't have to have a day job, which a lot of people are like, oh, I can't make this work. Yes, you can make this work. So I think that this is the future of medicine and the future of healthcare. And we need to be embracing that and we need to become proficient at it. So remember to download the energy guide that we created for you. It has some of these cool charts that you're going to see on the organic acid test, the Krebs cycle and all that, and use them. And you can just do that at reinventhealthcare.com/energy.